All right, guys, we are live. Welcome to Bitcoin Magazine Live's 29th stream. We're here to break down the Michael Saylor MicroStrategy. I don't know what they're calling it. MicroStrategy World 2022 Bitcoin for Corporations event. It's like a massive couple hundred hours of guests speaking, all condensed into 2 days. We just watched Michael Saylor and Jack Dorsey. We're here to break it down for you guys. So I guess I'm here with Q. Initial reactions to the talk or the interview that Michael Saylor conducted with Jack Dorsey. Q.
I enjoyed it. We were talking a little bit about this beforehand, but hearing certain stories about the way, Jack and his partner bootstrapped Square, going around and showing how it actually worked, to sort of how they came about, or how the Lightning development came about from Square Bitcoin or Square Crypto, now Spiral. It was inspiring just to hear the way they sort of think about these things, and how some small decisions led to the big wins that we are today benefiting from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how everything was really well compartmentalized by Jack. He's got, his speaking parts and his thoughts down in terms of like what he wants not only to get out of Bitcoin, but what he wants to contribute. And obviously, tons of capital and thought went into these projects that I feel like he really explained well for the first time. I mean, do you want to break down some of, between Spiral and Block, his own ventures into mining, uh, all that stuff?
Yeah, let's do it. Do you have a particular topic you want to start with?
Off the first, I mean, I think what he said the least about was TBD, which would be a decentralized exchange, place for people to buy and sell just Bitcoin, goods and services, and Bitcoin. I'm not really sure, but I think that's in hot demand, especially because, countries, aside from spreading misinformation about Bitcoin or kind of like propaganda, like you see in Venezuela with the petrol coin, leading people to other like centralized government alternatives, CBDCs. I think one of the major risks in this space is on ramps and off ramps are too centralized, cash apps included. And I think Jack recognizes that. And TBD seems to be, I mean, we don't really know what caliber of effort, but some effort to stop it and to solve for that problem.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a huge fan of Jack Dorsey. I'm a huge fan of Block as a company, both as a user of some of their products as well as an investor in their stock. I do agree with you though that the idea or concept of having a centralized entity create something decentralized is inherently, it goes against the grain there. Like, if the company itself is the one that is going to hold the keys and control this, then it, regardless of what you say, regardless of how decentralized you claim it to be, there's still that centralized control. What excites me about TBD is the fact that it affords you the opportunity, if it's done to the extent and vision that Jack has outlined in the white paper says, it will be the first exchange where you can essentially transact anything. And what I'm really curious to see is if there will be some sort of like back end fix or remedy to, if I want to go from Bitcoin to a house, let's say that is something that is offered where you could literally buy a house on the exchange of TBD. Does that mean though that when I'm transacting my Bitcoin in the back end, it's going to transact it to USD or whatever fiat that is accepted to complete that transaction as it, for the house itself? Or am I able to just directly go and almost essentially pay for a house over the Lightning Network? That to me is going to be very impressive, and I'm just curious to see how that looks. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd want some final settlement transacting for something as big as a house. I don't know if the Lightning Network would be the way to go with that one, but it might be. I mean, I don't know to what. I mean, maybe Chris can chime in on this. I know he's more of a Lightning expert than I am, but to what extent and what amounts are people transacting Lightning on? I mean, I know the whole ecosystem. What does it have? A couple thousand Bitcoin between all the channels on Lightning right now? Is it much more than that? Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, we're getting a little into the weeds here, but I think it's yeah, I don't know. I guess my takeaway from that part was there's more. TBD is TBD. I mean, we'll see. I really liked hearing a little bit more in depth about Spiral. You know, they're trying to accelerate worldwide Bitcoin adoption by creating development tools, kits, kind of like infrastructure that'll make it easier for people to build better user experiences, make the network more secure, just kind of like plug and play tools. So it's easier to adopt Bitcoin Lightning and Bitcoin itself across platforms and develop. So it's amazing work. It's interesting to me actually, because at Bitcoin Magazine, we have pretty much the same mission statement. We're trying to push Bitcoin toward hyper Bitcoinization and whatever way possible, but like totally different takes, right? Like we don't do any of that. Dog is bugging me here. Q, what did you think about Jack's comments on Spiral?
You know, I really liked hearing the way it came to be. The fact that, you know, they approach it through the lens of like, oh, we need to flip to Alex's camera despite me talking, because that is just the cutest.
She found a way into my office and she won't, you know, she's bothering me. So she's just going to join the stream, I guess.
No, she is not a bother. This is the stream has been upgraded. What is her name?
Zoe.
Hi, Zoe. Hi, Zoe. Welcome to the show, Zoe. When did your dad orange pill you?
Not soon enough.
What to bring it back to Jack and Spiral, I'm big on company leadership. I love seeing and hearing how certain leaders approach either expanding current businesses or just how they operate and maintain their business as is. And you know, hearing their approach of let's let me listen to those who are experts in this space. What do you need to succeed? When the head of Spiral, who I believe is going to be a speaker actually at Bitcoin 22 in Miami, quick plug to make sure you get your tickets. He mentioned like, let's just go out and get five developers for the Bitcoin network and see what they want to work on. And they went and did that. And their expectations, frankly, was, oh, they're each going to go siloed off and each one of them is going to work on one project. But in actuality, what happened was the five decided to collaborate and they worked on one project. And that one project was the Lightning Development Kit. And now that Lightning Development Kit is used by Cash App and it's used by many other apps as well. But the ability to give Lightning network capabilities to Bitcoin wallet apps, huge, a huge step forward to hyper Bitcoinization. And it happened not because Jack wanted to create the Lightning Development Kit. It didn't happen because Jack saw opportunities in Lightning. It's because he stepped back and listened to those who understand the space, those who want to develop in this space, and let them have the freedom to develop what they believe the space needed. And I think it's a net positive.
Yeah, I think I just checked, and yeah, indeed, Steve Lee will be speaking at Bitcoin 2022, which is pretty exciting. It'd be great to we'll have to get him on the show before that too.
You
Give
hear
us the
that,
inside
guys?
scoop at yeah,
We fact check live on Bitcoin Magazine Live. No lies on this show.
yeah. We verify everything. Actually, no, we'll continue in the vein of Dorsey and Saylor. It was an interesting format to see. I kind of want to like rehash and check out Saylor's questions in that interview. I thought he did a great job, and it was interesting to me that Jack Dorsey is his idol in the Bitcoin space, as he said. As I mean, I think they're both just monsters of the space. I think you know, it's telling who Saylor chose to spend, you know, his time with this afternoon. I think it's just Lyn Alden and Jack, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I think those are the segments that Saylor is going to be sort of handling or curating, if you will. I know that right now, I believe Chris mentioned it's their CTO. I don't know if that panel is still going on. Um, but you know, I think another thing just to be cognizant of we are very familiar with Michael Saylor and Jack Dorsey, the Bitcoin community, especially. But their names still hold credence outside of this community. And for them to continuously be out there sort of pounding the drum, um, just because we're the ones who love to hear them talk about Bitcoin doesn't mean that there are people who are not in Bitcoin who love to just hear them talk, because, these are billionaires in their own right who have essentially won the game of capitalism, if you will. And I personally always find there is a value in hearing what these people say and think and how they process information. And to have, last year after the Bitcoin conference, there was the virtual conference, the B word, I believe it was, where Kathy Wood had Michael Saylor and Jack Dorsey and Elon Musk, you know, talking about this. Overall, it's a net positive. We continue to just have more conversations around Bitcoin from high level people who are looked at across industries, not just from the Bitcoin industry, not just from, the social media or fintech space for Jack, or data analytics for Michael Saylor. Um, we're taking steps slowly but surely in the right direction.
Yeah, and as Jack said, I mean, we're closer than we've ever been to, I guess, a native currency of the internet is like his favorite thing to liken Bitcoin to. What do you think about that, Q? Is Bitcoin a native currency of the internet?
Oh, absolutely. My story, whenever this comes up, is I believe I'm stealing this from Jeff Booth. The 400 errors, where when the internet was created, a 404 era, we've all seen or dealt with. Page not found, whatever. You entered the wrong thing, or they deleted that specific page link. However, one thing that kind of goes under the radar is there's more than just the 404 error, and there are countless others. 400, 401, 402, 403. These were all created when the original internet protocol was designed. This was not created by Facebook when you get the 404 error. Oh, no, Facebook did not create that. That is literally the base layer of the internet that has that. And I believe it's the 403 error is actually a payment error. So that signals that the original creators of the internet anticipated some form of digital native currency of the internet to create a 403 payment error. I'm going to confirm this to 403, or it might be 405.
Interesting.
But that to
Yeah, but
me,
what you're getting at is there are protocols as rudimentary, as crude in their initial engineering as Bitcoin that are out there underneath everything that we do. And we don't even, most people are completely unaware of it. And only at like certain moments are those kind of like bare bones exposed.
exactly. Like we wouldn't, I would not know if it were not for me listening to Jeff Booth and Preston Pish talk about that. And if it's not Jeff Booth and it's someone else, I apologize. Please feel free to correct me in the chat. But I know, like, I have told that story countless times. And I genuinely, that for me was sort of the final culmination of, oh, there's literally, it's going to be Bitcoin. Like, there's no other way it can be anything else in my mind. Because it's native to the internet, but the decentralization of Bitcoin is what separates it. Because I mean, I go back and forth on this, but there's an argument to be made about whether or not the internet itself is genuinely decentralized. So I don't.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not technical enough on that front to know. I mean, I would say, I mean, what are the requirements to run internet, right? A means of transmission, a means of reception.
Right, but there are
That's
really
about
only
it.
three. There are really only three cloud providers at this point that I'd say cover almost 90 to 95% of all webs and applications that we interact with. AWS, Oracle, and Microsoft, I believe, are the companies. And so, like, that is
But
centralization
that,
in
but
much.
that,
We
that's actually
witnessed it.
not the internet. That's not the internet itself, though, right? Those are
Correct.
secondary
Correct.
layers.
Right.
It
Fair.
would be like, I think it would be like, if everyone started using Bitcoin through Cash App, because you can so easily send Bitcoin over Cash App, and then we'd be like, well, Bitcoin's centralized. And it's like, well, not really. People just chose the most marketable, easy to access centralized on-ramp and off-ramp to use Bitcoin, but the protocol itself that underlies it is not. But like I said, I don't really know enough about how the internet works to say whether or not um, it's like truly decentralized. I think there's a really weird like no true Scotsman fallacy that happens around Bitcoin where we say like Bitcoin is truly decentralized. It's like, well, what does that mean? You know, it's more centralized or decentralized than other cryptocurrencies, but I don't think that is in and of itself like what distinguishes it from all these other assets, right? I
I
think it's
mean,
one characteristic, but
yeah.
I don't think it's the be all and end all of the difference. I hear this. I mean, do you hear this? Like, oh, it's more decentralized than everything else. Like that's true, but it's not the whole truth. I don't think.
Well, to your point, yes, it is one case to be made about why Bitcoin is some the most successful, or whatever sort of adjective you want to put in front of digital currency. I know scarcity is always going to be a conversation, but there are other assets that have a limited supply. And then it turns
Mm-hmm.
into who gets to control and say what happens with that limited supply. And when it becomes a centralized entity, all of a sudden that limited supply, like you almost have an asterisk next to it,
Mm-hmm.
because on a whim, someone can just wake up and be like, you know what? No, we're gonna our
Yeah,
token is
we're
gonna
gonna
now
we're gonna
devalue.
disenfranchise all our users. Yeah,
Yeah.
like so it goes back to it. There's not one aspect of Bitcoin that makes it this great thing. You can't just point to the decentralization. It's everything. It's the halving. It's the distribution of the network. It's the anti-fragility. It's the lightweight blocks. It's the fact that it's the longest chain. I mean, that alone, it makes it hard for anything to compete. The fact that you're not going to be disenfranchised unless the whole network adopts some sort of change. And even in that case, you still, what you own is still Bitcoin. Like that's a fundamental difference between it and other cryptocurrencies. So I guess bringing this back to the discussion we heard today, it becomes very obvious to me when you understand just kind of like two or three of these like differentiating features between Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, why Jack would say, you know, NFTs have identified a problem that needs attention, but they're a solution to nothing. And I'm putting words in his mouth there, but that's the feel I got from what he said. Maybe you remember better, Q. I'm not sure.
Um, I no, I kind of think that like he is very good about like it's Bitcoin only for him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do want to highlight really quickly before we switch over to this. So Pete Rizzo is ripping us apart for our decentralization definitions. Uh,
Wait,
decent,
why?
decent.
I used Pete's definition. What
Oh,
did he say?
oh. Well, his thing is decentralized has a specific definition. It means that anyone can play any role in the protocol's operation. I mean, I don't disagree with
Yeah,
that.
of course decentralization matters, but it's not the whole. People often say Bitcoin is truly decentralized, and adding the adjective truly doesn't add anything to the argument. That's a fallacy.
Fair. I would
So
also kind
yeah,
of
I
sorry.
do like his definition though. Anyone can play any role, any barrier to entry is determined by the market and not any group of users. I mean, that's the better definition than I had. That sounds great. Yeah.
Yeah. But now to go back and actually answer your question, I mean, I'm a big believer of like actions speak louder than words. At no point while Jack was there did Twitter's Twip tips offering ever offer you anything outside of Bitcoin, and there were no NFT profile pictures. But now Jack's removed, and what was it? Within the first week, we were commenting internally about, oh, see, look, now you can tip in Ethereum. Now you have NFTs on Twitter. I think his actions have shown that his priority is Bitcoin and Bitcoin only. I almost kind of respect him because he's never going to be like, yo, fuck Ethereum or fuck it. Like, he's a very open-minded person and kind of understands that this broader network coexists, and like we are only going to get so far if we're bashing and sort of demeaning other projects. That said, I don't necessarily think he's like supporting other projects. I don't think he's putting his money or investing time or energy in other projects the way he does Bitcoin. And I think that again goes back to actions speak louder than words. And his priority is, and ever since last summer at Bitcoin 21, he expressed that Bitcoin is the most important thing that he could work on. He's doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you love to see it. What else struck you from this conversation, Q?
You know, I first learned about Square because of like the actual Square card readers. I love sort of hearing the conversation around both bootstrapping and like really going around showing merchants like how this works, plugging it into the headphone jack, swiping it, and then their reaction over, oh my God, that was so fast, like it's been settled, and then translating that over to like the Lightning Network. And you know, he's essentially validating himself as I have experience doing this. I've already shown merchants once that I can give them access to credit card payments that they previously never had access to before Square. That was like a foreign concept to them. It would take too long, wasn't worth their time. But I helped them sort of see the light and help them get there. And now he's literally going to end up doing this with Lightning. And he's going to introduce Lightning to all of these freaking businesses. And it's going to be glorious and great. And all of a sudden, you're going to go into your gas station and you're going to be able to pay for a lighter for $2.25 on Lightning or with cash without having to pay the fees. Like I had to pay a 50-cent fee in New Mexico just last weekend. And I literally spent the whole time trying to explain to the guy at the counter, like, you should just accept Bitcoin because like there are no fees and it would just be on the Lightning Network. It'd be so much faster, so much easier. But
Well,
no,
let's be clear though, there are fees in Bitcoin.
there are fees, but
100%.
it is, I mean, look at it like this. It was a 225 lighter and I was going to be charged a 50-cent fee for using my credit card.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, that's the fiat system. You're paying to use your own money. You're
totally.
paying with your time. You're paying with fiat outright when you go to withdraw money or have it stored anywhere. There's a huge maintenance cost in fiat, and in Bitcoin that cost is, I would say, more transparent because there's definitely a cost to maintaining the Bitcoin network as well. I mean, everything requires it needs a method of like staving off entropy. But in Bitcoin, I think it's just a more fair, transparent system. We have mining.
Yeah, I mean, I might have missed this segment, just stepping away from my computer for a second. But his mining conversation, I am very interested to see sort of what these mining like materials that they use to build out the actual computers, how they're going to get and spread the access around the world. I don't know how deeply he dove into that, but that is something that like I'm definitely and genuinely curious about watching them develop. I know that that's a very big thing that they wanted to create, sort of decentralized mining pools. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, excited to see progress on that front. I think that all these huge warehouses full of miners are just like honeypots for governments. I mean, you can see what happens in other countries, see what happens in Venezuela. Government just steps in, swoops up these miners and says, these are ours now. This is our hashing power. What are you going to do about it? Like, and that will happen. I'm sure it will happen here. Bitcoin mining is not immune to government capture, and the best way to defend against it is to make it easier. The same definition of decentralization that Rizzo has for Bitcoin itself, we can apply to mining. So anyone can join and mine. You know, if you have a good source of electricity that's cheap enough. Oh, you got your tinfoil.
I, we're going to tip
And no,
off of what you said.
what did I say?
I want to play a little bit of like a game theory game with you right now because like I'm a big believer.
Hold on. Let's
Sure.
finish this
Finish the
thought and
thought.
then we'll play again. Okay, so yeah, the mining needs to be more decentralized. I think we're gonna see a rise in at-home mining of, you know, as these ASICs get, I mean, hopefully cheaper, easier to use. I think I'm, you know, I'm optimistic about the Intel chip, about, you know, Jack, whatever solution his companies are going to provide. It was hilarious to me that he that he said he was, he could like buy tacos with his at-home mining rig that he plugged in. That said it was mining off hydro. That's one thing I didn't understand. Do you guys remember that tweet that he had about
Oh
the with the
yes,
ASIC plugged in with the ant miner plugged in? He said it was hydro powered. But he said
yeah.
he's at his house. What kind of castle does he live in? Is powered by a moat?
I mean,
Like
the man made two unicorns. I'm sure he can afford to have some sort of hydro
a
electro.
waterfall?
I mean, it's not as it would be as simple as just having like a free flowing. Like honestly, if you have a
Yeah.
fountain, you could integrate in theory a sort of energy capture system that every time the water is flowing, it's churning the turbine. You're not going to necessarily get like a ton of electricity. It may be enough to literally power one computer, which
Do people generate power with like the ocean tides? I know they use rivers and dams, but I'm just curious. A boat. Well, let's do it. We already know how to get the power back to land. We use Blockstream satellite
I mean, dude, isn't that
and beam it
that's the
back.
that's the ongoing problem with so many of these green energy solutions is like they're only able to really help within a finite area of whatever's close by to them. We have a really hard time of spreading the energy around. I think that I've said and I will continue to say until it comes to fruition, but like I do think the next iteration of like what energy capture looks like as far as efficiency comes from Bitcoin mining because we're the most incentivized to find cheaper and better solutions.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an awkward debate to have. I'm excited to have Alex Epstein on to talk about this more. I'm sick of hearing about we're only going to work with Bitcoin if they're green. I'm sick of the weird environmental concerns that are pretty baseless. I mean, I haven't seen any evidence that CO2 is an inherently bad and that expending energy is inherently bad. And I tend to think that the more energy we've harnessed as a society, the more kind of free time we'll all have, and the happier we'll be, and the more cushy jobs we can have. There's 10,000 years of human, like, I guess that wouldn't be evolutionary, but societal history that can back that up. I mean, that's how we went from, having domesticated animals to harvesting wind turbines to crush grains to make, just separate the wheat from the chaff to this is one of the big reasons, although people like to just think it was like Abraham Lincoln and Susan B. Anthony, but like one of the reasons slavery ended is because it's not economically viable. It's way too much effort. Have you ever tried to force someone to do something, whether even I have this experience in MMA jiu-jitsu every night. Like it's fucking difficult to force people to do things they don't want to do. Requires way too much energy, way too much pushback, way too much free will involved. It's easier to have something like a horse, and what's better than a horse? An engine. And what's they think is better than an engine, I guess, would be like a Tesla electric solution. But you know what I'm saying? The more energy we have at our disposal, um, I think we're generally the better for it. Now, the flip side is also true that energy can be kind of a black ball that screws society if we have too much of it, right? Or the wrong kind of it, or the wrong person wielding it for the wrong reasons. But generally, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with having more energy at our disposal as a society and as humans.
So I want to unpack a few things that you said.
Okay,
Um,
what did I say?
so I would argue that the over 1 million members of the Confederate Army would disagree about the economic feasibility of slavery. I would
No,
also
no, no. America was the last holdout. I mean, there are. This is why there are slaves in some definitions, but like broadly, it's not sustainable. It's just not. If you have access to machines, you don't need slaves. You have a fucking tractor. Like,
I mean, look, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that there was definitely a contingency of people who literally took
mhm.
arms in disagreement with the idea that they want to essentially, whatever their farming business, whatever their business was, they did not want to go into the next iteration of the technology of that, and
Mm.
they
Yeah,
wanted to
can I
keep it in house.
respond to that? Yeah, I
Please.
agree with you. Yeah, totally. I'm not saying everyone just like drops their shackle and, ball and chain and just says like, "Oh, this isn't going to work anymore." It's just no, it's like a long process with a lot of pushback. Interestingly, I see the same sort of thing when people are up in arms about technology is going to take away like truckers' jobs. Like, what will the truckers do if all the trucks are automated? And it's like, what the fuck did they do before there were trucks? Like, what have people always done? They're innovated. Like, people are innovative. They learn. They adapt. If you can't do that, you won't make it. Tough. It's the market. Like, there's a competing marketplace for jobs and opportunities for people. It's like you're seeing this now where people are having difficulty switching to like use the internet to help them find work and get a job and like survive the pandemic. And I hate to say it, but that's just survival of the fittest. Like if you can't adopt and educate yourself to have the jobs that new, like more progressive generations created for society, I mean, the long-term like viability of your business, of your like capital allocation strategy is not going to pan out.
I completely agree. I think we have this issue. Historically, there are a lot of examples of this when you have technology enter an industry that deems certain jobs obsolete. There's a pushback because there's this idea of, well, if I can't do this work, then what else am I going to do? Rather than having an open mind of, well, if this technology is created, what other opportunities does this afford us to have? We have now more time. We talk about the truckers, we talk about the people working in factories, even still worried about automation in factories. I mean, I respect and appreciate the work that has been done to get our society to where it is now, but I also kind of put emphasis on we got here because we continue to innovate and develop. If we're going to just sort of put our feet up and say, all right, we're done, we're good, we made it, I won't sit by quietly or calmly to that. I want to see.
That's how, when you're distracted by twitter.com and you have your goggles on, you're in the metaverse for 2 years straight. That's how you wake up locked down with a fucking shot in your arm. Like, yeah, I definitely agree with you. You don't want to sit like rest on your, what's the expression? Rest on your laurels just because we
Yes.
have new better technology. It's definitely a time to use your time and allocate it more efficiently to more important projects. And the problem and the trade-off that every person has is like, what am I supposed to like do with my time and myself? And this is the battle that Jack Dorsey was having with himself, and you could see it. You could see the shackles come off when he quit Twitter. You know what I mean? The gloves came off and he just went after every venture capitalist, like bullshit crypto web3 firm out there. I mean, it's amazing to watch. And this is what happens when you allocate your time with some two things that are in line with your principles. I think it's very liberating.
Yeah. I do also want to touch on just sort of energy use. Um, I have no problem with increasing energy output. I do have a problem though if we continue to increase it at the current rate of inefficiencies that we have. Um, like a perfect example, I've spent the last like 3 nights trying to explain to my cousin what upstream data actually does and how they capture the energy excess that comes off during the natural gas mining process. And he couldn't wrap his mind around it. And where he got stuck was, wait, so you're just telling me that before this company existed, before this type of energy capture was created, we were just like wasting the energy? And my response was like, don't, if this upsets you, like I would not recommend like looking up like the inefficiencies of oil mining or the inefficiencies of gold mining. Like we are very inefficient. And I think that needs to be prioritized rather than, oh, what's the new sexy way for us to do it? Like I would rather spend the next 10 years, we don't need to create the next version of solar or wind or water. I don't need that. What I need is, how do we get the excess wind power in Palm Springs out to places in West Texas? How do we get the solar panels that are absorbing all this excess energy all throughout LA, all up and down the coast of California, even down to Baja? For Christ's sake, like, why not create a world that allows for more energy to be more efficiently used across the space? Obviously, there are government restrictions. Oh, I thought you said Denver Broncos. Uh, uh, Government restrictions would prevent like the idea of us sharing energy with Mexico or Canada, but I would like to see a more globalized economy, and I think part of that is energy. Um,
Well, part of that is Bitcoin freeing the capital controls. Excuse me, I'm hicking up really bad. Go ahead, QT.
Okay, so while you can't talk, I'm gonna go tinfoil hat. So, um, you brought up like the idea of like Venezuela. I believe it was Venezuela, right? That just took over all the mining rigs from the miners set up in their country. And this will not be the last, nor will it be sort of the only attempt at a nation state attempting to seize control of hash rate of the network in some capacity. Um, I am of the side that believes that, a lot of the wars that we saw over the last 20 years in Iraq were due in large part to the control over oil. I will put my tinfoil hat on for what I'm about to say next. But I definitely believe that this was not big enough, sorry, but one of the main reasons, we had such an aggressive approach with Iraq was Iraq introduced the petro euro in the late 90s. We are still on the petrodollar standard. The petro euro did not really last very long. In fact, it was killed shortly after 9/11. So that just, to me, I view the world as there is a control over energy resources, i.e. right now in present day, the main source of energy is oil. As we continue to develop Bitcoin and Bitcoin becomes sort of the purest form of energy capture, nation states will shift their priority over the control of the petrodollar and to a control of the Bitcoin dollar, if you will. And I worry and fear that while we talk about sort of entering this Bitcoin age and that war may not necessarily exist in the same way that it did in the past, that unfortunately, like, there are still greedy people. There will still be bad actors sort of in positions of power. We need to, I think, be considerate of those bad actors that end up having some control, and making sure that we help protect those members in Venezuela or those members in the next nation state that try to seize control over the network, because it serves all of us and all of our best interests to have people, individuals controlling this network rather than centralized governments that have really led us down the right path over the last few hundred years now. I'm also fully hijacking the show right now. And my first decree is, I think we should give out some sats. I don't know if I'm going to get scolded for this, but I think those of you who have tuned in and heard me go on my tinfoil hat rant and have earned a few sats. So we'll throw in a code right now in the YouTube chat. So if you're not watching on YouTube, be sure to flip over here and we'll put out a code in the chat shortly. If Alex has recovered from his hiccup debacle, I'll tap him back in. But in the meantime, I also do want to take a moment to quickly shill and remind everyone that a lot of the big news that came out of Jack Dorsey's mouth regarding Bitcoin stemmed from Bitcoin 21. Being in the room, hearing him say with his own mouth, like, Bitcoin is the most important thing in my generation, and if I wasn't at Twitter, if I wasn't at Square, I would devote my life to this. And now he is doing exactly that. Like, being around that environment, being in that space was probably one of the best experiences I've ever had. Highly recommend you guys make your way out. If you don't have a ticket, our discount code YTMAG is still up and running. I'm not going to be quoted on what the discount percent is at the moment, but be sure to use it. It is officially 10%. So if you have slept on it, we have warned you for over a month now. We had a 21% off. It is now 10% off YT Mag. We'll probably end up just taking out that discount code altogether at some point, and then you're just going to have to pay full sticker price. So be sure, if you don't have your ticket already, go pop over to b.tc/conference, buy your ticket, and use the code YTMAG. Give us a shout out too in the chat if you ended up winning the carrot code. In the meantime, also we have FedWatch coming up later today with Ansel. Really excited about that segment. We'll be chatting to him about sort of what he sees going on, especially after the FOMC meeting last week. Another big takeaway, I think, from the Saylor Jack conversation, to bring it back to what we're really here talking about and chatting on. You have these two thought leaders who are trying to push forward a technology that's frankly still in its teenage years. And they are not hoarding or hiding anything. Jack explicitly said everything that they want to work on is going to be open source. I know that was music to Matt Odell's ears, hearing the prioritization of open sourcing all of their code and making sure that everyone has access to it and can contribute and continue to build off of it. I remember years ago, one of the main reasons why I actually bought into Tesla, and Chris, forgive me if this is actually wrong, but I genuinely bought into Tesla before this, but please correct me. I believe it was in 2013 when Tesla was really picking up steam at first. Elon Musk went and put all of their battery technology at the time just out on the internet. And if someone could build off of it or create more efficient systems, like, he was open to it because he understood the assignment. And the assignment was, let's create a more energy efficient solution as far as automobiles go. And you're seeing a similar approach now with Dorsey and Block and Square, where what they're going to work on is going to be open to the public, so that if someone who's necessarily not employed by them, but can see a way that it can be improved upon, or just overall made better, they're open to that. And I love that. There's no ego involved in this. They're not hoarding it for the sake of making a few extra fiat dollars or mining an extra Bitcoin here or there. They genuinely want to help the community and the society. And again, I will always pound this point home: watch their actions, not what they say, and their actions continue to cement that. So I'm really excited to see what they continue to develop. I'm hoping TBD has a new name in the future, but TBD on that.
Let's let Anselin hop on over to FedWatch. I still have the hiccups. I'm sorry.
Guys, in the chat, what is your hiccup remedy? I'm big on, honest to God, used to take a glass of water and drink it like from the other side, upside down, and it works. On God, it works. I really try to get Alex to drink a cup of water backwards and see how that pans out, because if you've never done it before, it's really funny for those watching. Can we hop over to a commercial break, and then we'll have Ansel on and we'll do FedWatch.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of FedWatch. I am Ansel Lindner, and Christian had a scheduling conflict today, so he will not be joining us. But I think the guys here from the live stream, they will be jumping in and out. Maybe if you guys have questions throughout the episode, you can throw them in the chat and we can just freestyle it. I have a few stories here to go over, some stuff from the Fed and new nominees to the Federal Reserve Board. Of course, the Arizona story we're going to cover real quickly. Some new developments out of China and Evergrande. And finally, the IMF GDP forecasts. So again, any questions throughout this episode, just bring them up in the chat. Okay, let's get going on the Fed news. Now, everybody knows the recent headlines have been all around. Is the Fed going to raise rates? How many times are they going to raise in 2022? I saw a story that was predicting 7 rate hikes in 2022 from CNBC. And I'm like, oh my God, that's just ridiculous. It's not going to happen. It would be lucky if they could get 1 rate hike in March or April, and that's about it. They'll have to reverse course, in my opinion. So we'll see how that goes. Of course, the CPI around that time will also be tanking because it's a year over year number. And if you look at back in 2021, April, May is when it really ramped up. So if you're comparing it year over year, most likely we're going to see CPI really start going the other direction this April and May. So in that time frame, is the Fed going to be able to raise rates as the CPI is falling and the global economy is like tightening up once again? We'll see how far they get. But that's not the big story I wanted to cover. The new stuff this week is Biden's nominations to go to the Federal Reserve Board. The big one is Sarah Bloom Raskin. She's taking over, or she's nominated to take over for Quarles, who we have reported on leaving the Fed in December. So his position was vice chairman. He was number 2 at the Fed, and he's also he was head of supervision. So what they do is the head of supervision is in charge of like setting rules and regulations for within the Fed and for entities that interact with the Fed. So it's a pretty big job that they that's open, and this Raskin has been nominated to go into. She's a controversial pick, however, because she is pretty radical progressive. She's kind of friends with Elizabeth Warren, and Bitcoiners will know Elizabeth Warren because she is like one of the biggest enemies of Bitcoin in the US Congress. But so this Raskin is along those lines as well. She's outspoken to open to using the Fed and regulation and even monetary policy for climate initiatives. So, she's really in that line of globalist, Davos, progressive type, just exactly like Elizabeth Warren. So it's not really that good that she would be number 2 at the Fed. One of her main criticisms that she's made over the last couple of years about Quarles in particular is Quarles letting energy companies, access Federal Reserve liquidity. So in 2020, she would have had the oil companies just go bust instead of giving them access to, emergency funds. So she's really into penalizing the fossil fuel industry, and Bitcoin goes right along with that, right? If Bitcoin mining and all of that stuff. She's also talked about CBDCs and cryptocurrencies in general. She's a big fan of regulation, kind of regulate now, ask questions later sort of person. So all in all, I think this Raskin is a bad choice for the Fed, but will it hurt Bitcoin? I don't think it will hurt Bitcoin all that much. It might actually bring more headlines for Bitcoin, right? Like if she's going after Bitcoin, if the Federal Reserve is doing XYZ for CBDCs, maybe, that brings the Overton window over towards Bitcoin more. So that would be a good thing. And that's all I have for Fed news. Do you guys have anything to add or anything from the chat?
Nothing from the chat, but I'd love to just quickly expand a little bit on, the effect of some of these potential nominees and its direct effect on Bitcoin. I take it from what you're saying. It's sort of like this: all press is good press, almost. Or would you say, is there something that
Yeah.
you're keeping an eye on the Fed in particular to Bitcoin of like, hey, if they start having this dialogue or this conversation, we need to have our warning signs up?
Yeah, I think the first one where you said that all press is good press, and Powell has, love him or hate him, he has really stiff-armed CBDCs to a very big degree, and also regulation on Bitcoin. He's even talked about regulating stable coins like banks, bringing them into the system. So and he has nothing against Bitcoin, as far as I understand. He's light touch on regulation in that regard. So I think as long as Powell's there for the next 4 years, we should be okay. And in that time, Bitcoin is just going to continue to grow. And by the time Powell would ever get out, maybe then they would try to clamp down, but then it might be too late. So overall, I don't think this can hurt Bitcoin, but I think it's important to kind of see the dichotomy that's going on. I put it in context of, I think the Fed has kind of broken ranks with the ECB and other central banks, especially along these CBDC lines. And this is kind of an example of that, where like if what's her name? Raskin, if she was in Europe, she would be guaranteed to get on the board. But here in the US, it's actual controversy around this. So I think it's just interesting to know what's going on there at the Fed. Okay, let's go on to the next one is Arizona. And I saw Natalie did some coverage on Bitcoin Magazine a couple of days ago on when this broke. But just to rehash what happened over there in Arizona is they had a bill introduced to make Bitcoin legal tender. And, alongside the US dollar, it's exactly in the blueprint of El Salvador, right? What happened in El Salvador. But this is a huge, huge deal in a macro context. If just looking at a GDP comparison, the state of Arizona has a GDP of $375 billion a year, and the GDP of El Salvador is 25 billion. So the GDP of Arizona is 14 times bigger than El Salvador. So if this was to become a legal tender in Arizona, it's just another domino that's falling, and it's at the heart of the U.S. hegemony over the global financial system, one of the 50 states. So this would be a very big deal. Now, will it happen? I don't know. There's a lot of legal questions around it. The biggest being the constitutional issue. So in the Constitution, it says that states cannot make anything but gold and silver legal tender. That brings up the question, the current US dollar is not based on gold and silver. So is the US dollar, can they even make the US dollar currently a legal tender? So that's the kind of question that would make it so maybe the federal government wouldn't come after Arizona, because it would open them up to being like, oh, well, what about the current US dollar, right? Another issue is a lot of people are saying this is similar to the marijuana laws, federal laws versus state laws. And it's pretty different than that, actually, because I believe that the federal law is unconstitutional in that case. And the states are, the reason why the federal government hasn't sued the states is because the federal government would probably lose, because they're the ones in the wrong, where the states are the ones in the right in that scenario. So the legal tender question is actually flipped on its head from the marijuana question. So anyway, then others like that are in the know. Caitlin Long, she spearheaded the effort in Wyoming for Bitcoin, and they had to drop even trying to make Bitcoin legal tender there because they said it was unconstitutional and non-starter. So again, this is opening that Overton window, sliding it towards Bitcoin, for Bitcoin to be in the conversation everywhere. Even if it's not legal tender in Arizona, it at least chips away at the narrative of the dollar being the king, right? So that's my Arizona stuff. Any comments or questions on that from the chat?
Nothing from the chat, but love the push, legalize it.
Right. Yes. And now let's get into Evergrande. So this is one of my, I guess, my favorite macro topics here is the fall of China. I've been talking about this for at least a couple of years. If you go on to my other podcast feed, Bitcoin and Markets, back in February of last year, so a year ago, I debunked the Thucydides trap, which is, as a rising power takes on a declining power, and going back and forth. And I said, look, that whole idea is wrong, and it's definitely wrong in the case of China. They're just one big credit bubble waiting to pop. And then we saw what happened in the rest of 2021. They've had some major economic issues, most recently, of course, being Evergrande. So the new news from Evergrande is these state-owned entities or enterprises are taking over a lot of the real estate market. They recently were exempted from the 3 red lines policy from the Chinese Communist Party. And what those are is, I can't remember what month it was, like August, September, that they came out with these new regulations that had to do with liabilities versus assets and cash on hand versus like short-term debt obligations. So there were these 3 red lines that they made, and it had the effect of putting all real estate developers in China pretty much in the red, insolvent right away, outside of the regulations. So that's one thing that really kicked off this crash over there in real estate. But anyway, so these state-owned enterprises, now they are exempt from those 3 red lines. They also have unlimited access to credit because they're part of the CCP. They can't be turned down by the banks. So they're snapping up all of this real estate. It's almost like it's a de facto nationalization of the real estate market over there under the radar. Like, this is under everyone's noses that this is happening over there. So really big deal. I also said that China had a choice, either Japan or North Korea. So as their credit bubble is collapsing, they can become Japan and stagnate, or they can become more authoritarian like North Korea and starve. So I was like, stagnation or starvation. And it looks more like they're going towards North Korea. And that's a really bad sign for the global economy in general, because, China is a big growth engine for the world. Another story out of Evergrande is suppliers. So this is an example of second and third order effects, and why central planning doesn't work. So right now, the suppliers are of the suppliers of, say, furniture or plumbing supplies or whatever to Evergrande. All these other companies are going under now too. So, and these are not small companies. These are $100 million companies, $1 billion company, say. And let's just take an example of furniture. So a furniture company that was a $100 million furniture company that employed 50,000 people, and they only sold to Evergrande. So now they are out of business too. And those 50,000 people are out of business. And the lumber and the metal suppliers that supplied the furniture company, now they are having to have problems as well. So these are second and third order effects that we're starting to see roll through China. And it's a downward credit collapse is what's going on over there. So that is all I have on Evergrande. Any questions from the chat or from the hosts here on the other side?
Chats are empty, but I am genuinely curious. I've been following Evergrande ever since sort of the news came that they were about to default, and the effects of what that could lead. From what you're sharing with us, it almost sounds like no solutions have been found, and they are slowly and steadily collapsing. One thing that I did remember, and I'm not sure if you mentioned this and I just missed it. My apologies. China's approach when the Evergrande news first came to be was, we're going to prioritize the citizens over these businesses and allow, if the businesses need to collapse, the businesses need to collapse, and we will deal with that. But we want to make sure citizens are secure, their money and their finances that have been tied up in this. Is there any sort of change in that sort of policy by China, or are they now sort of trying to help push businesses to save themselves, if you will? I know you kind of touched on the suppliers and whatnot, but specifically out of the CCP.
Yeah, in general, no, there's been no change. So what you're speaking to is that some of the bond issues, were foreigners. So foreigners owned the bonds, and they were letting Evergrande and other companies default on their foreign bondholders and not their domestic bondholders. That's still kind of going on. One development that I thought was very interesting is there's this hedge fund, U.S. hedge fund called Oaktree. I guess they're very big. I never heard of them before, but they went and seized some Evergrande real estate on Hong Kong, this big undeveloped piece of land that they had invested $500 million into, and Evergrande never paid them. That this American company went and seized that property. They also, on mainland China, outside of Shanghai somewhere, they seized a bunch of, I don't know, 1,000 acres or something of undeveloped land from Evergrande as well. So there are some secured lenders outside of China that are able to get the property that they are owed. But most people that, all these bondholders were unsecured. So they're all out of luck pretty much.
Do you envision if the CCP goes a full authoritarian route, just pure speculation, not anything factual based, but like, would you suspect the CCP to turn around and tell these foreign entities like, no, you can't own property in our country despite whatever deal or money, the way it flowed? Or what effect or anything do you see the CCP having on these foreign entities coming into their country?
Yeah, I think that people will always be able to invest in China because China wants their money to come in, right? But the thing is, they probably won't ever be able to own property outright. I think even today, it's mainly leases. Like you'll buy a lease for 100 years on a piece of property, something like that. Now we might see something like that continue in the future, maybe get worse. Maybe they force you to have some sort of insurance policy that makes it uneconomical for most people to buy property over there. I don't know. They could do a lot of different things, but overall, they are becoming a very bad environment for foreign capital. So I don't think foreign capital will go into China at nearly the clip that it has over the last 10 years. I think, we might see 10% of the foreign direct investment actually making its way into China.
That makes sense. It'll be interesting to see how China sort of reacts in the coming months and years. There is a question from the chat that I want to present to you. What is your best guess of what China may look like economically in 10 years? I know you kind of touched on the sort of going the North Korea authoritarian route, starving their citizens. But can you give us like a little bit of a range of what the possibilities that you could see?
Yeah, well, I think the CCP is kind of finished. So my base case is that in the next 10 years, the CCP is gone, or maybe not gone, but maybe they lose control of parts of the country or something like that. So that's my base case. And if and when that happens, that will be good for their economy, not initially, but that'll be good for their growth prospects once they can cast off the communists, they can kick them out of the country. I think then China would have a brighter future once again. But until that time, I think that they're probably going to be a faster fall than Japan into a stagnation and start looking more like North Korea. Seriously, like they could have major problems. And if that happens, there's going to be capital flight. There's going to be human flight, immigration out of China. And I mean, the wheels could fall off of Eastern Asia, that's for sure.
I mean, I think if the CCP lost power, that would be a massive geopolitical shift, not only in China, not only in Asia, but just globally. I think it will be very interesting to see if that comes to fruition. It would definitely be one of those moments where everyone will remember where they are when they heard the news that China, the CCP no longer has power in China.
Yeah, I mean, they are historically authoritarian, right? Because they had the empires, the Chinese emperors and all that stuff going as near as early 20th century. They had an emperor still. So maybe that won't happen. Maybe they like to have their emperor. They like to have somebody in charge, and Xi Jinping is going that route. But, when you're a middle income country like China is starting to become, and now you're facing a prospect of a credit collapse and you're going to go back to being a very poor country, something's going to change. Some sort of leadership change is going to happen in China for sure. All right. So the last thing I have here is IMF growth. It's GDP forecasts for 2022. They continue to go the wrong way. So they just did an October update to their forecast for 2022 and now a January update. The global GDP numbers fell from, or the forecast fell from 4.9% down to 4.4. The US fell from 5.2% growth down to 4% growth. And China came in still at a 4.8% growth, which I think is wishful thinking. But this is, just showing that even at the IMF, even at some of these kind of inside power structure think tanks, they are seeing that the economy is slowing down. And I've seen some analysts say that the US could slide into recession in the first half of the year. That would be very quickly. I don't know if that's quite the case, but yeah, it's not looking good. As the global economy is slowing down, will the Fed be able to hike rates? So we're going to come from the end all the way back to the beginning. Can the Fed hike rates in the face of slowing global economy? And that's all I got, guys.
We've got a few questions now rolling in. If you'll entertain us, what do you think of the Silk Road Initiative, or how that's going to impact Kazakhstan?
Okay, very good question. The Silk Road Initiative was a really good way for China to recycle their dollars instead of, because they have this huge trade surplus with the United States. They used to buy treasuries. But instead of doing that, what they've started doing is, over the last 5 to 10 years, they've started using that to finance projects on this Belt and Road Initiative. It's actually an ingenious kind of plan that they had. And Kazakhstan was a big part of that, because I think Kazakhstan has a border with China. And so they were a big piece in this like Central Asian route that was going to go. It was going to be a big highway and big rail lines and all that. There's a lot of different political trouble with that right now. It's not as easy to make these corrupt Central Asian governments buy off on all of your plans. And so there are some hiccups. It's not all smooth sailing. Like people think, oh, the Chinese are so efficient. They just get everything done. They want to build it. They build it. They'll get it done. But it's not like that. They're human just like everybody else. And they're running into roadblocks as well. Specifically about Kazakhstan, maybe he's talking about with this recent military thing that they had there, the recent uprising. I don't think that's going to impact it very much. I don't think so.
No, awesome. Thank you for the color on that. We have one more. What about the legal tender and the Uniform Commercial Code? Isn't there a provision that if a recognized sovereignty has recognized an asset as legal tender, other sovereigns are obliged to recognize?
Yeah, I've heard that. I'm not an expert in that field. I have heard that though. When I did try to look it up when El Salvador first did that, because that was a talking point at that time, and I really couldn't find anything specific on it. So if you guys do, I would love to know. You can hit me up on Twitter and ping me if you guys find information on that. But that would be interesting. I'm kind of more interested in what the IRS says about Bitcoin. If it's legal tender, is that now money and there's no capital gains? That would be very, very interesting.
Awesome. Well, I don't know if Alex, if you've recovered or have any questions that you want to ask Ansel, but this has been super helpful. We'll be definitely keeping an eye out on all things Evergrande and Arizona legal tender. So thank you for those updates, man.
Thank you, guys. Have a good live stream, and we'll check you later.
Thanks, Ansel. All right. Short break now while we show you guys give you a look what the Bitcoin 2022 conference may look like. And then we'll come back. We'll be joined by Nolan here shortly, followed by Mark Goodwin, I believe. So just a couple minutes and we'll be right back with you. All right, we are back, guys. Welcome if you're just tuning in to Bitcoin Magazine's 29th live stream. We just had the great Ansel Lindner on to talk Evergrande, the CCP, all kinds of great things. This episodes of FedWatch we're always looking forward to having them every week. So can't wait to have Ansel and hopefully CK on again next week, maybe with a guest. For today's show, we have still to come Nolan and Mark Goodwin, and we're gonna get back to you guys with some updates about what's going on with Michael Saylor and Lyn Alden's conversation, which should be starting any minute now. So we'll let Nolan in, and Q and I will join you all just again in a few minutes. Hey Nolan, how's it going?
Life, guys. How about you?
Pretty good. We'll hand it over to you at this point if you're ready to go.
I sure am.
Awesome.
Hi, everyone. Nolan, Bitcoiner. Happy Chinese New Year. I've done my best to include a Chinese character today for Chinese New Year. It's the character for fortune, Fu, it's called. So fortune predicts a big Bitcoin boom is what I call today's episode. And what we're trying to do here is really look at some of the prediction models used both in Bitcoin and in financial markets, all over the place. One of the interesting things about horoscopes, when I was first looking at technical analysis in Bitcoin, and we were putting it into the CoinDesk sort of repertoire every day of editorial coverage, CoinDesk at the time had really begun as a technical journal of what's going on in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and scaling debates and the engineering side. And so when the market piece really started, you had some people say, oh, CoinDesk, stop, what are you doing? This is pseudoscience, it's voodoo, what are you doing? And the answer we had was, well, it's horoscopes, right? It's just like horoscopes. It's fun. Come on, people want to read, what's going to happen. Let's see what the tea leaves say and let's go with it, right? So it's a type of horoscopes. Omkar Godboil, the guy who was doing it at the time, still to this day for CoinDesk, who's great at it, is kind of like an international celebrity because he's good at this divination, right? It's a really fun thing. And when I looked at the two of them, though, I said, well, in the end, technical analysis and horoscope divination, which one's really stronger, right? It's hard to say, right? At first, it says we're using math, using science, you're using all these practical skills and tools to predict markets. But really what you have is an observer problem always, right? In technical analysis. So technical analysis never really gets over the problem of who's doing the analysis. Omkar is great, people love him. It's the same way a lot of horoscopes actually work in the real world, right? So we see these horoscope folks giving fortune telling. We see this girl Marin, she's great, right? She's got a big following now on Bitcoin Twitter and makes all kinds of predictions. What she's using there is the Western version, right? The lines and the angles. One of the interesting things, though, when you start to think about why these things persist and why horoscopes have been able to last for so long, it's because of this observer problem, right? This observer problem, different than TA, and I'll get to that in a minute. The reason why we have these horoscopes in the first place, the reason why there's 12 signs in both the Chinese version and the Western version is because it takes 12 years for Jupiter. It's Jupiter, right? It's a Jupiter thing. It takes 12 years for Jupiter to orbit. And if you're actually going to fix the stars and use them for reference, because Jupiter moves into these different houses, you actually get a complete version of the sky, right? You get a complete version of the sky. In some religions, you see why Saturn, right? The planet Saturn, and then in the mythology, Greek mythology, Roman mythology, why Saturn had such an important role is because Saturn is actually more persistent in the sky than any other night object. Right? That's why it was called the little sun. That's why it's Saturday and Sunday on the weekend, the two big light sources. It was called the little sun because it was light at night. They didn't understand that the sun was actually providing all the light and the reflection in the solar system. They thought there was some source of light at night. No one would believe it was the moon because the moon disappears for days like it has today on Chinese New Year. It's gone. It's a new moon, right? It's totally gone. Jupiter also disappears for times. It's not as reliable. Saturn is the most reliable object in the sky, why it's sort of, second in command in the Western system. So these 12 signs end up giving you this fixed point where you're able to then make references. So what the I Ching does, right? We talked about I Ching last week, and this is where the entire calendar comes from, right? That's why there's 12 characters in both. The calendar, so we have the calendar from it, right? Both calendars are derived from that. It's the year 4719, I think, in the Chinese calendar now, as of today. So I Ching ends up taking this fixed point of the orbit of these different planetary bodies and then adds randomness to it, the I Ching, right? That's the randomness piece. In the case of the zodiac, like what the Western zodiac, like what Marin does, she's taking actually orbital math, right? So different orbit, different specific points. And because there's so many different combinations, you get a version of randomness there. Now, the fixed point plus the randomness has allowed a situation where these predictive models have lasted for thousands of years now. We don't even know when the Western zodiac began. It looks like Cro-Magnon's caveman had actually in the Alps or in the Pyrenees actually painted the stars onto those animals, right? Those animals are actually the signs of the zodiac. So we've been following these persistent, reliable beacons in the sky for a long time, using them as fixed points, and then using calculators on top of that to make models and go out into the world and try to understand stuff. So it's what allowed us to move all around the planet and have a common reference, right? Really, in the end, it's the common reference that's so valuable. And so the prediction, I don't see any reason why horoscopes would stop. People seem to be loving them and people follow it and believe in it. And I can't say one way or the other if it's true or not true. That's not really what it's about, right? It's a system that seems to work. It seems to have resisted decay and entropy. And with the fixed point and the randomness seems to be as viable and lively as ever. Now, if we move from there to some other fixed points, right? We can see that, and these are the other elements of the Chinese system. So it's not just the calendar, the earthly elements are also important. And when we look at these earthly elements, earth, air, metal, right? The predictive models formed from them are a little difficult because we don't actually get over the observer problem with any of them. So earth, right? We have this element. So we think of the numeraire now in Wall Street. Here's an interesting fact. With all the money that's been printed, with all of the monetary policy, fiscal policy that's gone on over the past 2 years, you can literally take every single bit of Wall Street research, every forecast, every model, all the work they've ever done, and you can actually throw it in the garbage. It's not worth anything because the number changed, because the numeraire changed 2 years ago and has continued to change. You don't know what you're doing anymore. None of the math makes sense, right? The fixed point was removed and therefore predictions off of it become a lot more difficult. Let's take air, right? We see climate models a lot, right? In 2015, 2016, I forget the year, fact check it. We finally had satellites that were strong enough to measure more accurately the amount of trees on Earth, right? So you had all these estimates before. When we go into climate models, right? When we go into climate models, we plug in the data and we get a picture of what's going to happen, right? We use these predictive models to understand climate change, right? They probably got a lot right as far as the difference in temperatures of the air, difference in the polar ice caps, difference in melting. I'm not arguing with their observational science, right? What I'm talking about now is the predictive models, How many trees are on Earth is really important for carbon capture. It's really important to know what's happening to the air. So if you underestimate the number of trees on Earth, you got a problem with your model, right? You don't really have a fixed point, right? You don't really know how much air there is. It's kind of hard to measure, right? And if you don't know how many trees there are, you don't know if the air is getting cleaned or not. You don't really have much reference at all. You haven't gotten over the observer problem. You're still stuck there listening to people who are counting trees. Doesn't matter if they have satellites. They got to count the trees to get it right, right? You can't understand the air otherwise. So just like Wall Street, just like you can take all of the research they've ever done before 2020 and throw it in the garbage, you can take every climate model ever done before that, not the models to understand what we've already done, the damage that's already been done by whatever it is that's happening, right? That they probably got right. I'm not versed enough in climate modeling and science to know what they got right or didn't get right. I think they got it right. But the modeling is where I have my questions, right? How they predicted things in the future. And if you take away or get it wrong how many trees there are on Earth, your models are busted. You got to make a new one, right? You got to just admit that everything you did before is no good and you got to start over. that happen? I don't know, right? I don't think it did, right? I think they're still going on some models that were used before with the poorly estimated trees because it's still useful. Metal, right? Metal, that's the other element in the Chinese system. They get money from that for many years, right? But you can actually see the decay and entropy in money in China itself. When the Spanish dollar was the reserve currency of the world before the US dollar, you see these things called Chinese chops, right? They'd gotten so used to fraudulent money that wasn't the right amount of gold in it that they started cutting holes into the money with their names, with their initials, with the Chinese characters. And they would cut holes right into them and they'd pull it out and they'd find out if it was really the amount of metal they had said, right? So historically, we've gone through this problem of decay and entropy in metal and money for many years, right? It's not new to us. You can see it in history. It's been observed many, many times, right? So just like financial models built on, literally land, real estate value, all of the things that go into our current financial system, into current Wall Street, doesn't really get over the observer problem at all. Air, climate science, all those models do not get over the observer problem. Metal, you literally needed an observer to cut a hole into the metal to make sure it was still pure, right? You needed that. Now, water, right? So those are 3 elements. Water is another. There's 5 elements. Water is another. Water is an interesting one because what we actually did with water is we created an entire system based on the properties of water. We used water as a fixed point to build the entire metric system, right? So the way we get, for Americans who maybe don't know the metric system where it comes from the properties of water, because if you control all the factors around the water, the temperature, the pressure, all the earthly forces, you get what is observed as a sort of static version of water, right? Water at a certain temperature, then it has certain qualities, the volume, right? That's where you get the basic unit of volume. Temperature, right? The freezing of water became 0. The boiling of water became 100. And then you just divided everything between 0 and 100 and you had water, right? And then you had the metric system because you just shared the common, widely used qualities of water. And now we've got this metric system, which we can use in all kinds of math, and it's quite useful around the world because we've gotten rid of the observer problem. You don't have to tell anyone that, oh, it's actually based on water at this temperature. I don't even know what temperature it's at, right? It's just, I remember that it was done at those qualities, and therefore we get over the observer problem. The next one is fire, right? Fire. Now this is where things get really interesting, right? Fire. So the way to measure that, we actually do have a measurement that comes out of fire. It's joules, right? The heat emitted is joules, right? Joules from the sun at a certain point when we're talking about electricity. Joules are really just the heat that's coming off a system, right? And with those joules, with that energy, we've done something that is pretty unique. We've gotten rid of the observer problem again, just like we did with water for the metric system. There's a fellow named Spencer Nichols, and he had a bit of a tweet thread about this. Now, Spencer seems to be a physicist getting into quantum physics and all that stuff. So I'll try to translate what he says because it's quite complex the way he says it. But he says that Bitcoin is a natural transistor for computing universal value. Given Bitcoin's terminal monetary entropy is 0 and the network rate of adaptation is greater than 0, it means that it's got this quality to get over the observer problem because it's a fixed point, right? Because you're always looking at the previous hash and then adding another, the previous hash actually provides this fixed point for you. He goes on to say that, let me just make sure I find it. So essentially, we can observe Bitcoin within its time set without interfering in its order. What is even more fascinating is that Bitcoin is enforcing the liberation of thermodynamic energy at scale via ordering it perfectly in a cryptographically realized stable universe, right? So what he's basically saying is that by getting rid of the observer problem, by solving that observer problem and collapsing everything into this agreed upon shared reality, right? That this thing happened then, as long as enough nodes are watching it, and we know, and we can check that some nodes were watching it at this point, we know that things happened when. And this becomes really resistant to entropy, right? This becomes resistant to all those other problems and removes the observer problem from the situation, right? We now, just like with water, have this agreed upon system that we can extend to all kinds of uses, right? So the metric system was extended all over to be useful, right? I'm pretty sure it's the reason why we made it to the moon, right? I'm pretty sure having a really good unit of account that just moved a decimal here and there in order to understand it, and you can do these calculations really quick in your head, was quite useful in advancing mathematics around the world and getting humanity up to a much more, you know, a time where it's much more capable, right? Much more capable. So what Bitcoin actually offers, right, by focusing on joules and energy, the energy used, right, the actual hash power of the network has stopped any loss of power you can have, and then becomes a really interesting platform on which we can make other predictions and do all those things that we've, you know, we see calendars useful for, we see the metric system useful for, right? And the things that we could not get out of money before, because the combination of these elements here and the models that came from them never got over the observer problem, right? We're stuck with it. We're stuck with who's measuring how much, what country has how much land, what system does that country have, what legal system, is it good, is it bad, do they have energy there too, how many people, what's the birth rate, right? All that stuff's important for you know, microeconomic decisions, for how to, you know, get people to consume something or sell them something. That's not exactly the same as people storing value and storing their savings, right? So air, you know, like I said, it's the same issue, right? We have these climate problems. We don't really have a useful way of predicting what's going to happen. I saw the other day that there's a, you know, they got to take a bunch of signs off of a glacier in California because it didn't melt according to the predicted scale. It should have melted by now. The sign they put up years ago was like 2022. Everything's going to be gone. Here we are. It's all still there. Not to say that you shouldn't warn people about the effects of you know, what people are doing, but when you get it wrong, you got to check your model again and you got to adapt it. Did that happen? I don't know. I think they took the sign down and just kept using the same models that might have the right amount of trees or might not have the right amount of trees. We don't really know, right? Now, an interesting thing, because it is Chinese New Year, we're going to try and read the Chinese horoscope for Bitcoin, because Bitcoin was born in 2008, 2009, which makes it an Earth rat, apparently. So it's the Earth rat. Now, the way the Chinese system works is you take Earth rat, you take the year you were born, and you apply it to the actual year you're in. So Earth rat will live now in tiger year. So it's the year of the tiger. So the horoscope for Bitcoin, right, for Bitcoin is heralds a mastered year. So I just did this randomly. This is, you know, another one of these random things. I did not scope this out beforehand. I've taken it and I'm reading it here the first time. So the Earth Rat's Chinese horoscope 2022 heralds a mastered year for Chinese zodiac signs born in 1948 and 2008. Despite some conflicting situations and material constraints that can be overcome by showing intelligence and pragmatism, in 2022, the Earth Rat must be able to discreetly withdraw from projects that have become so perilous that they threaten its interest well beyond its initial investment. Without forcing fate too much, the Earth Rat should gain flair where luck is lacking and take into consideration the possibility that commitments made by third parties will not always be kept. Commitments made by third parties will not always be kept. Okay. Any risk of depression and anxiety, but also any excess of enthusiasm, must be detected and channeled wisely. Only a perfect organization of each project will allow the Earth Rat to fall back on its feet with elegance and flexibility. Okay, well, Bitcoin's forecast is kind of on par for what I would imagine for this year, right? We got to worry about, you know, third parties and stay humble in face of all kinds of changes. So that's my Chinese New Year message. And I think in the end, if this is true, right? If this system is true, that we have in fact solved the observer problem, Bitcoin then becomes the bedrock for an entirely new system of predicting markets, the economy, and all that stuff. And so I think the Chinese New Year does predict a big Bitcoin boom this year.
I love it. This is a great segment, Nolan.
Thanks, man. It's Chinese New Year, so we got to celebrate. The markets are a little low with all of the people celebrating, but we hope those red envelopes that have the foo printed on them usually come the way of the network and are transformed into, you know, fire money.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to segue over to Mark Goodwin, who we were just joined by, recent addition to the Bitcoin Magazine staff, wearing a new hat, it looks like. Mark, how are you doing? I don't know if you two have met, but Nolan, this is Mark. Mark, Nolan.
Hey, Mark.
Nolan, how are you,
Nice-
man? Really
I
cool
love
stuff.
life, man. I love
Yeah.
life, man. Did you get a
Yeah.
chance to see the Chinese New Year predictions?
A little bit of it, a little bit. Yeah, I was in hair and makeup.
Okay, it made
but,
sense. Yeah, hair and makeup stuff. It's tough.
Yeah. No, I'm excited to go. I usually jump back to this after air
Cool.
and check this segment before, but I like what you've done previously. So
Well,
yeah,
share
really
it,
cool.
share it with all of your friends celebrating Chinese New Year.
You got it. I will.
Yeah, I would love to get the two of you on together at some point. So I'm glad you met. Q, it looks like you're back. Did you get a chance to see any of Lyn Alden and Saylor?
I mean, they're still going right now. My big takeaway right now is Lyn is kind of really pitching, and I like her case about what we're witnessing. A lot of people are comparing it to 1970 as far as interest rates and inflation and their correlation. But she's presenting a really strong case as to why it's probably more synonymous with the 40s.
I'm with her on that one. She wrote a big paper on that last year. Totally with her on that one.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's really the conversation that they're having right now. She finished her presentation, and Saylor's just sort of asking her a couple of questions.
Nice. Mark, have you been following any of this, the MicroStrategy for corporations today?
A little bit, tiny bit. I saw that Jack was wearing a Satoshi Nirvana shirt from Lightning Store, which is pretty awesome. He's a friend of mine, and excited to see that. But no,
Jack's a friend of yours, or the Lightning Store is a
the
friend of
Lightning
yours?
Store, yeah.
Oh,
Sam's a
cool,
friend of
cool.
mine, yeah.
Oh, nice.
Bitcoin friend. But yeah, no, I'm excited. I've been working on a piece about the trucker convoy, so that's what I've been doing today. But yeah, no, I got a lot of watching material tonight.
Let's keep hoping they take their money away from them again and again, right? If that's not the best orange pill out there, I don't know.
That's exactly the point of the piece. It's a great example of Bitcoin fixes this, which is
no, I don't want anyone there going without dinner, right? I don't want to say that. I don't want any rob, but that it can happen, and that we had to listen for years that it's never going to happen here. Bam, 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 bam. To watch it happen over and over again is the only way for this argument to go away.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Well said.
Mark, what do you think about earlier today? We were talking about, not necessarily related to the trucker convoy, but just about how there will probably come a time where these these jobs are turned into jobs performed by robots and computers, and I think that's a terrific thing for humankind. I'm not saying Q, you took the other side of this, but I often hear the other side of this argument, which makes no sense to me, that it would be kind of detrimental to people who are apparently only capable of doing very specific tasks. So where do you stand?
Well, I'm sort of a student of Jeff Booth in this sense, and the deflationary effects of technological advancement are a net positive for humanity if the profits are distributed top down, which as they are set up right now, that's just not happening. So of course, I think anytime technology can sort of make lives easier and work easier, we should be able to ship things a lot faster, a lot more efficient, a lot safer, theoretically, and that should be a net positive for all of us. It should be that we all get to play in the pool of profits and Scrooge McDuck into the EV enabled goodness that comes from this technological advancement, from literal deflationary effects of technology. Unfortunately, the way that it's gone recently is things have gotten more and more efficient. Factory work has gotten more and more efficient. More and more jobs have been cut and replaced with machines, and wages have not kept in pace with the profits of these sort of megacorps, and that's a problem.
I have a follow-up question then. Does it not follow that if you set sort of a minimum wage, you're pricing out people whose marginal productivity is actually less than what they're being paid.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's an argument to be made there for sure about minimum wage, of course. I'm not necessarily talking about specifically minimum wage, but just wages have not kept pace. And yeah, we've had less job opportunities, and the jobs that are open are not meeting the inflationary effects of monetary expansion. So it's sort of a double whammy of not only are we not getting the benefits of the positive deflationary effects of technology, but then our monetary system is debasing so strongly, and we're not able to reap that benefit. I mean, a chosen few are, and not the working class, which is a huge loss and a huge bummer, because the working class is the shit, and we should protect them at all costs. As we are all working class, and yeah, that's the backbone of society, and we're kind of nothing without them. And the people on the top, these quintillionaires, are nothing without the working class. So we've got to take the power back, and I think this is a really interesting and unique scenario with the trucker convoy. That as long as they can sort of out attrition the the people being bothered by the honks, they have a chance of actually changing policy. I'm getting some word that my mic is not super great. So
No, it's great now. It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, you're fine. I
Okay.
don't know what they're talking about.
Okay.
So I have a couple of definitions. I'm not grilling you. I'm just like genuinely curious.
Yeah,
I feel like this falls in line with the trucker thing. And Nolan or Q, whoever, like, feel free to answer. Like, so what do you mean when you say there aren't job opportunities, or there are fewer? You hinted at something like that.
Well, I mean, okay, if you look specifically at industry to industry, and it's like back in the day, what it took to make an object in a factory or whatever, and there was not automation, and so it took an individual working each stage of the process to like put together even in sort of factory line operations, like Model Ts or whatever, right? There were still people at every step along the way, and they were all coming together to make a car. And there were needs for real human jobs at every line of the assembly line, right? Every point of the assembly line. And nowadays, with every new technological advancement in the factory line process, we have less and less people being involved in the actual creation of these technologies, and they're being replaced by robots. And I sort of jokingly say, like, the future, it's going to be you're either an electrical engineer or you're a constitutional lawyer. And if you're not either of those two things, you are shit out of luck, and you're not going to have a lot of opportunity for jobs.
Well, I think what happens is what's happened throughout the history of society. It's just that the nature of the job changes. You don't have to do these shitty manual labor jobs anymore. I mean, no one ever did. If you could think your way out of that problem, you could definitely create jobs for yourself. You can make up your own job. You can try to allocate capital and give value to this world in hopes of getting, Bitcoin in return. But I think education hasn't kept up well. I'm not sure whose responsibility that is. I'm inclined to say it's the people who want better jobs. It's it's your duty to educate yourself. But that's a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow. A lot of people want the government to provide them with education to get better jobs than once they are replaced by robots.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I've certainly evolved my stance from being sort of more of a traditional lefty, sort of like pro, minimum wage to $25, and it's like I've sort of evolved and nuanced my take, because I just don't really. I don't know. It goes both ways. Like I when I see huge profit margins at the sort of at the delight of or not delight, but at the, I guess, expense of when you see, like institutions like Walmart or something, where literally part of their their training manual and their onboarding process is like, here's how you sign up for government cheese in addition to subsidize your living wage, which that to me is inappropriate. And you have these big box stores that are these monopolies that are really taking huge claws away from small businesses and all these entrepreneurs that we want to enable. Like, we've created not a free market of labor, and that's really the problem. So I'm all about free market of price, free market of labor, but right now we don't have that. So it's hard to like pick a side definitively, because
how do we not have that right now?
I mean, we have it in the sense that the universe is a free market of everything. So yes, I agree with you there. But
okay.
I mean, if small businesses are being de-incentivized to exist because big box stores can come in and sweep out their market share underneath them in localized economies, and then that business is not even paying a living wage and is in fact using government contracts and government subsidies that come from taxpayers, that are being stolen from taxpayers to subsidize and pay for this working class. I mean, I would say that's not a free market of labor, because they're allowed to pay what, if there wasn't subsidies, people wouldn't be able to work those jobs. So it's difficult, because I hear what you're saying, and I agree. I've definitely developed into more of kind of like a libertarian economist, and just sort of like, hey, you know what, like this is the universe, baby, and it's dog eat dog, and you better take care of yourself and earn that bag. But I also have sympathy, because I think that there's a lot of systemic issues.
I just want to like I don't really identify as a libertarian. I just think it's more useful. Actually, this actually comes back to a different argument I got in earlier today, like one of like 7. But I think it helps people to learn to help themselves. Not that I'm the one to tell them to do that, but rather than pull people away from relying on these trusted organizations that frankly can't be trusted, that don't have your best interest in mind, but that are claiming to. I mean, whether that be a corporation or the government, I don't see how those two things are very different. But yeah, so I think like in those terms, I think it's always just better to or more useful to push people to self-edify, because that's the only way we can keep this, a free market. If everyone just becomes totally kind of like handicapped and can't think outside of those systems, we've got a real problem.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I also like, I know it's tough, because I have a lot of sympathy for people that I think are, that did the things that they were told to do. And they were like, go to college, take a bunch of loans out, go do the thing. The system is telling me to do these things. Q's pointing at himself like, ugh. And so they were sort of
off my undergrad debt.
Yeah. It's an incredibly real thing. And then also there's the predatorial banking system that's like, hey, like one of my buddies was like 18 and a half years old, and there was a promotion at a Bertucci's in Massachusetts, and they said, you sign up for this credit card and you get a free pizza. And he got like a $10,000 line of credit that he ran up, because he was an 18 and a half year old who just wanted a pizza at a mall.
Oh shit.
And now he's dealing with that stuff as like an adult. And it's like that sort of predatorial systemic stuff, be it the education system that is making lies to us about the job opportunities from them, be it predatorial lines of credit, be it predatorial subprime mortgages, whatever it is, there's a lot of predators out there. Yes. Is it on you to not get coerced by the free Bertucci's pizza and take it? Yes, of course that's his fault, and of course he's an idiot. That said, he's 18, and who isn't an idiot at 18, and who doesn't want to get a free pizza and $10,000? For signing something, come on.
We've talked about this on the show before, but out of my hesitancy to ever get into any debt, very, very fortunate as I went through school, scholarship, like state school, all good. Never had a credit card, but now I can't get one.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, so it's like, I mean, there's a lot of ways to go wrong. There's more pitfalls than there are kind of like ways to do this life right and navigate sort of our very complicated, weird economy. But yeah, I'm just curious. Q, do you have any thoughts on this before? I don't know what else there is to
I have
talk
so
about
many-
really, but
I have so many thoughts. I
yeah,
wanna
what do you think
unpack
about minimum wage? I feel like you're gonna clap back on some of this.
Okay, I will say this. I kind of agree with sort of what the way Mark presented his political beliefs, if you will, where like I was probably the biggest progressive, most hardcore, like I was labeled a damn socialist by my own like closest group of friends. Um, I see the wrongs in that path. I am not a socialist. I go back and forth on the minimum wage argument because yes, there is a case to be made where if you create a minimum standard, you have the floor. The entertainment industry where I stem from is the perfect case study of like similar to Walmart, taking advantage of the system that's just in place where you require a college degree from an accredited university. Like you had kids who went to like George Washington, you had Ivy League kids, you have kids all over the country coming into LA to get a job to work in Hollywood. But because the law says there's a federal minimum wage, they got away with paying college graduates. I got $12.50 after getting a 4-year degree in finance just because I wanted to go chase my dream. That doesn't happen if there is, in my opinion, if there isn't a minimum wage, because now you have competitive pricing. And the argument that gets brought back on that side, though, is well, that massive list of applicants, they're just going to be able to pit us against one another. And eventually someone's going to undercut what you're saying you're worth. And eventually they're just going to go for the cheapest labor. Eventually it balances out with, well, the cheap labor is cheap for a certain reason. The expensive labor is expensive for a certain reason. Where's that middle ground? Businesses should have to have should carry that risk themselves rather than passing that risk on to citizens, rather than passing that risk on to just the economy. The other example that I like to point to where I voted for Bernie in 2016, voted for him in 2020. And Jeff Bezos has been his target for like 5-6 years now. Jeff Bezos pretty much just said F you to Bernie and Liz Warren, where he took both of their campaign platforms, raising the minimum wage, paying off your student loan debt, giving jobs to as many people as humanly possible, making their fleet green. They've literally done all of these things at Amazon, regardless of working conditions, regardless of like the expectation they set on their actual employees, and that they have increased their internal minimum wage. They have essentially committed enough money to make their entire fleet eco-friendly and not rely on as much fossil fuels. You have them paying off student debt for their new employees as well. Like these are all programs that politicians were trying to push forward, that politicians, because of sort of whatever the gridlock is in DC, were unable to push that forward, maybe yet, maybe ever. But now you see private businesses starting to turn around. Like I was always big on for a couple of years, like I will literally go look up something on Amazon, find your store, like who are you, who's the actual distributor. I'll go pay an extra $3, $4, $5 to buy it off of your site so you can maximize your profits. I was doing that. I will also admit now, based on some of the moves that Amazon's made, I am more comfortable giving my dollar to Amazon because I see that they're using it in ways that I support and I believe in. And that's how we vote with our dollars. Maybe not everyone has the access to that. Maybe it's not net good for the economy where Amazon gets to squeeze out and push out small businesses and mom and pop businesses. And those are larger discussions absolutely to have. But there's always good and bad in every scenario. And we have to decide what trade-offs we're willing to accept. I personally don't think that just because you were born in a certain zip code or in a certain state or have this much access to internet or whatever should allow you or afford you greater opportunities than those born elsewhere. But that's just my own personal belief.
Yeah, I don't think it should, but it never will not. You know what I mean? There's always imbalances. There's no one is ever going to be born equal into this world. I think the only, like, relative to what, right? The greatest trials and tribulations of your life, the happiest moments, the saddest moments, it's all from your perspective, man. Like everybody has those for themselves. You know what I mean?
No, I get that. The real point that I'm trying to make as far as that is what we saw during the lockdown periods in the peak of 2020, where you have schools that weren't in urban areas, that weren't in necessarily like metropolitan cities. They were having a very hard time getting students access to the internet, getting students to just,
Yeah, I
because
worked at one.
so you can speak to it much better than I can, but like that is what I'm talking about, where it's on you say it best. It's on us to go and seek out the information, but to limit the access to that information, that is something that we can overall improve upon, rather than just sort of be like, well, it is what it is. Tough shit, man. Like if you want something better, move. Like I don't accept that as an answer. I think that technology, and personally, like I'm a big fan of what Starlink will do. That said, like I'm also king. I love going to a national park. Like I'll text 3 people, like this is my location for the next 72 hours. Phone is off. I will text you when I'm like back on the grid. Like I love doing that shit. Starlink will literally end that. Like it'll be almost.
But you can't really operate in this world without internet today. I guess it depends really where you're from. I mean, you can, but you're not going to reap the same benefits of income that that we do. You know what I mean? I don't know.
I got a thing about it, and I was just thinking when Q was talking that I guess if there was to be a minimum wage sort of conversation, I think it has to be sort of based on government subsidy and where it's if it's being sourced by taxpayer money. And so if you're a company that's taking subsidies from the government to to work to enable profits and you're one of these like too big to fail companies, I think there should be a sort of a level at which there's at least a ratio of profit to lowest level employee, like what the CEO can make in profits versus what the lowest level employee can make. And I think that there are some creative stuff. I think there are some creative stuff in some business models where they make that ratio, where if the CEO wants to increase their pay, they have to increase those profits as well to the workers below them. And I think that exact model hasn't been ironed out. I don't think that there's an exact perfect answer, but I think if you're taking government cheese, which as we know is from the working class, it is being redistributed. And if that
define the working class for us, because people seem to like to pretend that people who are running businesses are not the working class. Like they're spending every minute. I know, but we shouldn't. I know, but when you say working class, it's like, well, who are we talking about? Because the people who are allocating this capital, and as you move up the chain, Amazon at any company, that's a job too.
Of course.
It takes all day too. It's a very difficult work, very difficult decisions. I mean, I don't envy the work that they have to do. I mean, I wish I had that job, but it's like the ones who are the best at it tend to get the job, not always, but that's probably, how they get there. So why not let them choose how to run their business? And if it's unfair to workers leave and the market will, sort it out. And
but that's what I'm saying. If there's government subsidies that are offsetting, and if it's not a free market, like that's the sort of the thing. You can't pick and choose when the free market and when you want to champion the free market. If the government is subsidizing pay and is taking money from the working class, which includes Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, they are working class. Like they are. I mean, not in a lot of ways when you talk about class. You wouldn't often throw them in the working class, but in this free market concept that we're at, this ideal, they're working class. If there's government subsidies, which is a redistribution of working class pay, then I think it's like only fair that if there's a representational opportunity for there to be legislation that says, hey, if you're going to take money from me and pay these people that people are making profit off of, then we should really make sure that money is being, spent well, and is, people are not relying on further government subsidies like, food stamps or these other things like Walmart does. Like that's just wrong. I think that's really unfair. But I agree with you, Alex. Like I'm definitely like a free market person, and I think that It is sort of awkward when it's like, I want to, I'd love to have this person come in and work, at this bar or whatever and make, $5 an hour doing this thing that I would never hire them else, otherwise for, but hey, they could have them do this. Like, I understand that concept. But the problem is when it's like, this is my business. This is all we pay. Our CEO makes billions of dollars. We're Walmart. We are literally like cutting out from underneath from a systemic unfair advantage. And we are actually hurting the free market because like, that's not the free market. So if you're creating an imbalance and you're creating not a free market, then I don't think you get to stand behind the ideas of like, well, the free market will sort this out. It's like, well, you're not a free market. So,
but I
it's
still,
difficult.
I mean, I still don't understand. So, I mean, do you think the government should give subsidies to these companies at all?
I mean, not if they're making an insane amount of money. No.
But even
There
if they're not,
are,
why are we bailing out companies? Just let them fail. Why are we so afraid of failure? Like, let the person who, you know what I mean? Like,
I
let the
mean,
worker who can't cut it fail,
yeah,
and
let
let
the
the
U.S.
company
government
who,
default. I agree. I mean,
yeah,
I
yeah,
think, I agree. I think we should cut our losers and go. But I mean, we have rules and legislation against monopolies. They only are created with sort of a negligence from governing bodies. They're ultimately sort of a net negative in a lot of ways to society. Often. I don't know. I mean, Alex, these are big topics. I mean, this is societal planning stuff, and it's hard to say
yeah.
what the right answer is. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
if the government is playing kingmaker, then the kings that are being crowned by the government shouldn't be able to make more profits and pay their employees less because they're relying on government cheese. I think that that's wrong, and I think that the banks in 2008 should have failed. They should have gone under. But that would have been devastating to a lot of people. Unfortunately, the way that we did it, we bailed out the creditors and not the debtors, and we bailed out Bank of America instead of all the people that had houses, and that's a travesty. And that was a total handshake between, split between the Bush and Obama administrations, and a total handshake between the Fed and Bank of America and JP Morgan and all of these parasitic profiteers. And I mean, I have no sympathy for them, and I wish that they got hurt more. Unfortunately, the people that did get hurt are this working class. And yes, if you're a banker, you're a working class. I agree with you, Alex. But it's difficult to say because, yeah, I want losers to lose in the free market, but I don't want the people that were set up, that were lied to by the system, to get also hurt in the free market collapsing on itself. So when you continue,
I think that's you've identified the biggest problem, which is that we're being sold a lie, not only about how all this works, but about how our very time works, the time that we spend at these jobs. The $12 an hour is only $10 an hour at this rate of inflation. Like,
yeah, and we're just not a free market. I mean, the U.S. should have defaulted multiple times. It has defaulted before, but I mean, the like we're so far past the plank where we should have fallen, and we're just like floating in the air, still walking, and it's just like, what's gonna give? Are we gonna do another bailout where we hammer a bunch of planks together and try to extend it out and see how much further we can keep walking, or are we going to just fall into the ocean and see what happens? And right now, the whole entire world economy is 6 steps past the plank, and we're still in the air, and people are still pretending it's fine, and it's not fine. And if that bubble pops, and when that falls, which it should mathematically, it's going to be devastating to a lot of people. I think a lot of us are hedged in a way. We think we have one of the best hedges for all that in Bitcoin, which is wonderful. But a lot of people don't have that. And what happens next is going to be interesting. If there is a total collapse here, we have an opportunity in this devastation to like rebuild and how do we fix these systems? And one of the best ways to do it is take away the power of monetary expansion from corrupting from people, because that power is a corrupting agent. I mean, it just is. Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. I mean, we know that, and yet we continually put people in place to have the money go burr button right in front of them, and that is just too much fun, and you just want to
That's
press
all we
it.
know. It's not even that. That's all people know. That's
Yeah.
all they know. No one realizes that there's another option.
Yeah, I mean, none of us
we
have lived
do.
in anything. Yeah, we know it
Yeah,
because we've read about it and we've thought about
but
it.
we're a
We've
very
all lived
small
in it.
minority.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I mean, I agree with you. This is the best way to. It's not even about leveling the playing field, but it's about. I mean, I really believe that we arrived here mostly by mistake. People planning to inhibit their own destruction and keep themselves afloat rather than looking out for other people, which is fine, right? They had their incentives in mind when this economy was hodgepodge centrally planned, and we arrived at this complicated, messy system of governance, of monetary policy. And I think Bitcoin is like our only hope to walk this back. And I hate when people call it a parallel system. It's not a parallel system. It's a completely fucking orthogonal to the US dollar. Like, there's no sense to build this back up again or try again the same way. It's like, no, Bitcoin is like this. Like, it's you know what I'm saying? Like, it's our only shot. It's the only thing we have right now that can help us build and truly like progress towards what we have now, which is stasis and just central planning on central planning to try to stave off entropy.
Yeah, and I think also, like kind of what Q was saying, it's like, we were both sort of more traditional lefties and we're Bernocrats or whatever, like not even that long ago, like 5 years ago. And yet we are also a part of the fringe avant-garde that are on the forefront of, being a part of the Bitcoin story and Bitcoin revolution. And it's like this change, even in the people that are on the front of it, and I say that humbly, I don't take that much credit, but are learning these things. And I mean, this even today, like, this is a really good discussion, and it's like I don't know, I don't know exactly what the right answer is, because I fear that there's a human cost to the social layer of this change, and if we do this carelessly, a lot of people are going to get hurt. And it's one thing to just say, hey, free market, baby, let's go, and dog eat dog, and hey, it sucks to suck, and a lot of people are going to get hurt. I mean, we've talked about it on here before, like how many millions of people rely on US dollar denominated philanthropy and austerity to literally eat every day. I mean, millions and millions, like hundreds of millions. And that sort of just like, yeah, I agree philosophically, you create imbalances in the system by perpetuating, with some of these, government cheese subsidy sort of scenarios. But at the same time, the grander we have created these imbalances. It's up to us to sort of demolish them and let the air out of the bubble carefully, as to really not hurt a lot of people. And if we were able to kind of create fake money as long as we have, perhaps there's a way that we can do this controlled demolition that minimizes human cost. And that's why I agree with you about Bitcoin not being a parallel system, and it is its own thing. And we need a free market that is such its own, supply independent demand, or supply static independent demand, like entity that is Bitcoin. We need that. It's this beautiful free market of energy arbitrage that's incredible. But also, let's make sure that we don't just like, I sort of disagree with some of the concepts in the Bitcoin space in terms of actualization of what we do next. And it's like, I don't want millions of people to die because Bitcoin's right. It's like, I know Bitcoin's right. So how can we like do both?
What do you mean? Like, which concept specifically do you disagree with?
I guess just the idea that, like, if you don't get it, you're an idiot and you're stupid. And it's like, well, I honestly, at this point, like, if you haven't been exposed to Bitcoin, it is sort of on you at this point a little bit. But like, there are people that are getting onto Bitcoin now. Like, I see people that are like, I'm the class of 2021. And it's like, well, those people haven't had a lot of time to get much Bitcoin. And I actually think people are ultimately pretty bearish on how much they really need. I don't think a lot of us need as much as we think we do where we're going in 10, 20 years. But, you know, a Bitcoin is now significantly past, you know, what someone can on an average US salary can really make in a year, can really stack. And certainly when you remove yourself from the United States, it's harder and
What's
harder and
the
harder.
what's the average US salary? 35?
It's like basically what Bitcoin is. Yeah, it's right around there. And with I
Okay.
think it's under. But just because you're making that much doesn't
Do you
mean you can stack.
do you
that
really
much.
think the majority of people should know what Bitcoin is by now? And what does that mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're a very loud echo chambery minority. I don't think just talking to friends and relatives, especially those that live in overseas or in rural areas. I mean, I don't think many people understand. They'd be able to tell you it's a cryptocurrency, but if you watch our street interviews series, most people have no fucking idea what Bitcoin is. Like none. They have like name recognition, but that's it.
Yeah. I was talking to a guy at I got my haircut the other day, and you know I was just in contact with you guys here, and was you know there was I was finding out that I was like, okay, yeah, I was gonna be working with you guys.
Hell
And
yeah.
he was asking me what I was doing, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna be helping out with Bitcoin Magazine. And he was like, oh, Bitcoin. And I was like, oh, do you know about it? And he's like, not really, but he was like, I've heard of it, and so I think the brand recognition is really strong. Like people see the B, they know the orange B, they know what it is. They see Bitcoin, they know like, oh, it's some kind of cryptocurrency thing. And that's sort of like, I think that's kind of enough to a degree. Whereas to say that if we're really going to go to this like, hey, free market of ideas, and if you don't get it, then it sucks to suck. It's like, I think the exposure of the brand of Bitcoin, 2017 was a huge coming out party for Bitcoin, because it really exploded in this way that people had to pay attention to it, and that's why there's so many of us that came, out of that cycle. 2020 was another huge one. And I think every single time that happens, more and more people jump on. But I think we've sort of reached that mass level of like brand awareness. And I'm not saying that everyone understands Bitcoin, but I think people have there's such a mass amount of people that have heard of Bitcoin. And again, I live in the Bay Area, which is an echo chamber of an echo chamber, and it's super, super Bitcoiny. But I think if you live in a first world country, I think you've had you've had exposure to the concept of Bitcoin and the brand of Bitcoin. And that's where it's sort of up to entities like Bitcoin Magazine and, like a lot of things that people do to sort of to take that brand awareness and turn it into cognitive understanding and financial opportunity. But I do think we're rapidly approaching the point where it's like, it is sort of on you a little bit if you haven't heard of it or haven't done it. I mean,
Right. I mean, I'd
it's
agree.
exploded.
The the burden can't be on others to educate you. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, this goes back, but I do think, like, realistically, like, most people don't know what Bitcoin is, and they're not going to know what Bitcoin is until we're at $100,000. You know what I mean?
Yeah, very possible.
And even after that, they're not going to understand what opportunity it affords them until we're at $1 million. It's
I think those are deeper dives into Bitcoin that you're kind of touching on. And I even challenge you, Mark, a little bit on like this notion that so long as you're in like, not so long as, but like those who are in a first world country or a developed nation have had more exposure to Bitcoin, when in fact, like El Salvador is not a developed nation by any stretch of the imagination. They've adopted it as legal tender. I know that Iran, which is not considered a developed nation, like has frankly been using and transacting Bitcoin for the last like 4 years now, just because they've been dealing with such bad inflation. And I think that we've had this argument presented on this show, countless books, countless articles on Bitcoin Magazine as well, that kind of talks about those countries that are not involved in the fiat printing system and benefit from US dollars stand to gain the most when it comes to adopting Bitcoin. I think as far as like a brand name goes, like Bitcoin is as well known globally as Apple. Like everyone knows to a degree, oh, Bitcoin, that internet thing. Whether you actually understand the technology, that's a deeper dive into it. But if you say Bitcoin to a stranger on the street, 9 times out of 10, they at least have heard of it. They are aware that it exists and there's something going on. to your point, like how it can help them, no, I frankly don't even think we'll ever get to a point where a majority of the world ever really understands how Bitcoin is going to help in whatever capacity of life they're in. I think at a certain point it'll just happen and they'll accept it and move on with it. Just like how most of us couldn't really tell you how the light bulb in your room turned on when you flipped the switch. It will eventually transition to that. But when we get to that flip, I don't think it's going to be because more than half of the world or a majority of the world understands the nuances of Bitcoin and the technology and the code.
Yeah, for sure. I just think it's interesting to sort of to pick and choose when we are champions of the free market of ideas. And it's like, well, right now, Bitcoin is having its sort of its moment, and everyone's looking at it. And people initially in 2020, the COVID hit. They were like, oh, Bitcoin failed. It went down to 3,000, and then it 20x'd in a year, and it completely proved itself at a very important moment. And if you were there and you were ready for it, like a lot of us were, it was a generational buying moment, and hell yeah. And a lot of people weren't ready for it, and that's okay. I mean, that's the way it goes. Hopefully a lot of us stacked for our future generations and for our community and our families. And if you're not thinking like that, then shame on you, I think, to a degree.
Well, hold on. Bitcoin for a lot of people is the first opportunity they were ever afforded to actually plan realistically for the future. Because without Bitcoin, a lot of people, I think, in this space wouldn't have any savings. They wouldn't have gotten their lives together. From what I can tell, just anecdotally from talking to people, they wouldn't,
Totally.
So I only would point out that, and also that, I mean, I really, again, I don't think just because it's on the news here and there when we get a price pump or we've got, so many great voices in the community, outside of this community, I don't think people give a fuck. But the fact that, institutions, 2% of the global wealth is getting interested is exciting. I agree with you. I don't mean to be a bear. I just think that we have a long ways to go in terms of education and adoption, and that's where we can take it upon ourselves to educate others. Otherwise, they're gonna learn just by virtue of the spread of Bitcoin, and be a laggard, which not good, really. Yeah, as we know.
That's always society. They're always laggards and they're always leaders. And I think this is going to be the
Yeah.
next iteration of what that looks like. I mean, I think this notion that like everyone who is involved in Bitcoin has to understand the nuances of it. I think it works right now while we're building out what this industry looks like. However, once it sort of starts to expand beyond.
Wait, who said that though? Who said that we have to understand the nuances of it?
I mean, that is sort of what I'm taking away by your argument of if you're not understanding it, then like, why are you involved?
Who said that? No one said that either.
Well,
okay, I'm gonna go back to muting myself then.
No. I think a little bit just cross-wired communication, but I agree with both of you in the sense that yes, I do think that it's a small fringe minority with unacceptable. Oh no, sorry, that's a Trudeau quote. A small fringe minority of people with understanding and nuance of how Bitcoin truly works, and that's okay. And that's always been the case for any technology, be it financial or be it communications. How many of us really know how the internet works, or instant messenger, or AOL, or Starlink, or Zoom, or this microphone that I'm using, or this headset that I'm using? A very small amount of people. But how many people use all those things? How many people use Facebook? Billions and billions. So right now we're at the point where we're actually having a division, and not in a bad way, but the hobbyists and the sort of like, the nerds, I guess, proudly, that really get off on this shit, are sort of losing the market share, and the majority of people that are now going to be getting into Bitcoin and using Bitcoin are not going to be those people, and that's good, and that's okay. And the majority of people that are going to end up using Bitcoin are going to have no idea what a UTXO is, or a HTLC is, or any of the properties of what truly, like that. They're not going to care, because they're going to be like, it's just money. And that's something that I was talking about earlier today with Joe Rogers, texting on Slack today about, what are our competitors at Bitcoin Magazine? It's like, well, not really anybody, but in a lot of ways, eventually it's just going to be like Money Magazine, because Bitcoin is going to be money. So really our competitors are financial, lifestyle, and technology magazines. And so where we're going, and when we onboard and we start to have billions of users on the network, which is not that far away, it's far away in terms, we all want it to be tomorrow. We all want $1 million a coin tomorrow. It's not going to be that quick. I don't want that. Well, I mean, all right, Bear.
I surely don't.
I agree. I don't either, because I want more opportunity to onboard my friends and stack, of course. But
I just want Bitcoin.
yeah, exactly. And I that's something I say all the time. It's like, trust me, you learn that the more you're in Bitcoin, the more you want bears markets. Like, you want double day reds, because you can actually throw in, the $100 you have in your checkings account, and it actually gets you something. It's like, you want those days. But alas, I think where we're going is going to be a mass adoption from people that aren't really going to care about the nuances of how Bitcoin works, and they don't need to. And that's the beauty of building a system that's open and trustless and censorship resistant, and all of the things that we love about Bitcoin. That yes, right now we're in a fight for it, and we're building for it, and we're fighting for privacy, and fighting for decentralized on ramps, and we're fighting for no KYC and positive regulation. But in 4, 5, 6, 10, 20 years, your average Bitcoiner is not going to be someone that's read 70 books on economics and philosophy, and because we've always been sort of I don't mean this in a circle jerky way, but it's like we've always been kind of the fringe majority or fringe minority of people that do deep dives into subjects. Like this isn't really normal stuff that we're doing, and that's good. And Bitcoin will win when the average Bitcoiner has really no idea what's going on under the hood. And you could say that we're getting dangerously close to that. I would say some of the people that are in maybe a cycle before me, and some of the 2013ers and stuff, are like, can't believe some of the things that they see some of the newer people in the space say, because they're just like, how can you think that? And that division is already happening. And I see stuff like that too. Like, I see people say things like, you don't need to use an internet service provider to use your Lightning node. And it's like, yes, you do. Of course you do. You need to be online. Yes. So that divide and that division, this sort of I think they call it like eternal September or whatever that phrase is beginning to happen. And that's a net positive for the Bitcoin network, even if it can be a little frustrating for some of us more, hobbyists that really care about the nuances. But where we're going, no, they're not going to have any idea. They're going to use a card, like a Visa card, or use a QR code on their phone and have no idea, what's going on under the hood. And that's fine. That's good, as long as you build the system out right.
Yeah. I mean, I aspire to be at the place where I'm like, oh, this is it. This is everything that's happening under the hood of Bitcoin. But I don't think I don't think anyone gets there. You know what I mean? No. I think there's just endless levels to this thing as we break through the very simulation of life itself, trying to understand.
I just learned more and more that I have no idea what's going on. None. It's incredible. It's like, I'll be like, oh man, I think I kind of got a grasp of this. And then I'll enter into a space, and I mean that not like a Twitter spaces, but sometimes that, or read a new book or read a new thing. And I'm just like, oh my God, the people doing this stuff are so far beyond my rudimentary understanding. It's insane. And also the advancements of things. I mean, I remember when the Lightning Network launched, and now it's insane what it is. And I, obviously a lot of us, pretty much everyone here, was there for Taproot. That was not that long ago. Taproot hasn't even begun to do its thing yet. And the implications of what Schnorr signatures are going to do with Lightning and with these crazy multi-sig capacity things. I mean, we haven't even dusted the surface. It's crazy how deep it goes. And I think the people that are at the forefront are still discovering things and finding things every day that excite them about the possibility. So I agree that I don't think there's there's not an endpoint where you're like, I am Bitcoin and I understand it all. It's that's never going to happen. Bitcoin is a living, breathing thing. and it's evolving, and that's how tools evolve. Tools evolve out of necessity. Everyone should watch 2001 by Stanley Kubrick and watch the first hour really
Also,
carefully.
make sure you watch The Moon Landing, also by Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah, he's a great director. Yeah, no, for real. God, I love you. But definitely watch 2001 if you haven't seen it in a long time, and watch the beginning, the Dawn of Man sequence, and that's one of my favorite movies, and I've seen it a bajillion times. But every single time I watch it, I love more and more and more the beginning part, and less the space part. Even though I love the space part so much, but I think the whole story of humanity and evolution of tools is encapsulated entirely in the first part. The concept of tools are evolved out of a necessity. So the monkey hitting the tool or hitting the bone against the thing and making a weapon, making a tool to hit, and it came out of the necessity of them being scared away from their watering hole and their resources when they had babies. And it shows. I mean, it does such a good job of it shows the watering hole, and then it zooms in and there's a guy in a monkey suit holding a real monkey baby, and it's pretty funny, pretty cute. But they show okay, here's resource, here's biology, here's need, here's evolution, here's the tool being created, and then as the tool gets created, the necessity and the environment changes, and so the tool has to evolve to the environment. So Bitcoin is a tool that is created out of necessity to break down this fiat crap that we're in, and to bring to have rules of a financial system without rulers that can be corrupted by these corrupting agents. But now the tool has evolved, and now Bitcoin needs to evolve. Now there's all these threat vectors of Bitcoin being an open ledger that it's really easy now to track how people are spending their money online. And with KYC, it's even easier. So the tool has to evolve again to remove some of these shortcomings of creating a surveillance open ledger coin. And now we're at that state where, okay, then we developed a scaling tool with Lightning, and now we have some issues that we have to deal with Lightning. And so the tool is constantly evolving, and each time the tool evolves, the environment evolves. And so it's going to continue to do that. Our tools are symbiotic with ourselves. And it's going to be beautiful to watch, and we're going to see that happen, and it's going to be really powerful. It already has been really powerful. But Bitcoin will always be evolving, and it will not just ossify and become just Bitcoin, and then it's just over. It's always going to be having adaptations, new things, and eventually the social consensus will make it really, really, really hard to do sort of catastrophic changes. So it's really important that we do it now before we have this huge influx of users that maybe don't understand some of the technical stuff, or we have an influence of adversarial users.
Wait, slow down. It's important. It's important that we do what now before we get this influx of adoption?
I mean, to have these discussions and talk about privacy and talk about, I mean, Taproot was a really significant thing. And actually Taproot was a breeze compared to the block size wars. It was really easy. Everyone sort of agreed to it. I mean, that's a bit of a reduction, but I mean, sort of. I mean, it was.
I mean, there's a competing marketplace of ideas for to be included into Bitcoin as well. And I think what's interesting is that I mean, it'll be interesting to watch whether and to what extent we steal those from crypto, whether they occur natively on Bitcoin. I think this is something I'm interested in, the CTV adoption, as Ruben's a pretty big crypto guy. So it's what, which way do we go here? And that's not the only thing that's unique about the way that adoption would come in. Actually, do you have any thoughts on that? Have we talked about CTV before?
Check template verify. A little bit. I think he's incredibly smart, and I think that the ideas that covenants will allow, where where you can sort of there's, I mean, honestly, I really recommend looking into it and reading about it. And I think his advent calendar was really interesting, and he had a lot of really cool thought experiments in there. But basically I think his general idea is like we can put in a bunch of things now before consensus gets ridiculous, that we can utilize covenants and utilize these sort of like systems of agree upon sort of consensus above Bitcoin consensus, where people put their Bitcoins into these bigger understandings, and you can set really cool. It's not smart contracts in this way, where it's sort of like this misnomer maybe that they're used in some of the other chains and whatever, but like these, I think he used an example in his Stefan Liviera podcast. I think I'm saying his name right, where he talked about like if you have a cold storage situation, every time you want to, you say you have to pay rent every month, right? Today's the first of the month. I sniped 39K and paid my rent. Great. But that's not always the case. You could set up a covenant scenario where you actually, instead of having to go and finding where your cold storage is and creating these like security, attack vectors, or where you have to go, to dig out your cold card or take one key from your mom's house and the other, whatever it is, you're creating attack vectors every time you want to go pay your rent. And you're also creating opportunities for you to fat finger something and screw it up. Instead, you could cryptographically put your keys in a scenario where it unlocks, 1 Bitcoin to be made available to you at the first of every month, in a completely secure way. And if you don't sign for it, it just goes right back in. It doesn't take any transactional fees. And you can create kind of these little like scenarios completely custodially, that sort of help unlock like usability for Bitcoin. And that's something that I think is really important. I think Bitcoin is an ends to a mean. And yes, means to an end. And one of the biggest means to an end is actually freaking using it as money. And of course, one of them is holding and watching it appreciate. But if we're going to do this get off zero stuff, we need to be able to have access to it in a pretty legitimate way, and an easy way, and in a way that doesn't again, bring up all these attack vectors. So I think that ability to do that unlocks so many tangible use cases where we could onboard literally 1 billion people in a single Bitcoin block that is completely hidden to the mass network of adversarial people watching the chain, to the Lightning Network, which is like literally stuff we're going to have to do. If we have, we start hitting that big mass where we have like 2-3 billion people on the Bitcoin network, we literally physically can't have 2 billion custodial addresses on the main chain. There just isn't enough UTXOs. There isn't enough block space to onboard that many people. Humans have a really hard time visualizing exponentials, and the amount of people and the amount of like UTXO divisions we would need to have custodial wallets that hold any usable amount of Bitcoin. We never could have 3 billion people have wallets. It's impossible. And that seems crazy, but it's true. So we literally...
Wait, there are more than 3 billion wallets.
No. There's a number set. There's nothing stopping them from being that many wallets. But the actual like division of like to separate Satoshis into making there being like multiple billion custodial wallets, it couldn't happen.
Right, but the realm of possible.
Oh yeah, of course.
But the realm of possible wallets is fucking huge.
Oh, it's humongous.
Right?
It's way bigger.
Way more than we could ever fill. Yeah.
Yes, but we could. But that's the thing. We never could fill them. So
it's a pigeonhole problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the actual limit is in like the hundreds of millions, which is really interesting. Yeah. And you can do the math on that. It's always fluctuating a little bit, but yeah, the UTXO set is pretty big, and it would be hard to separate it out into that many custodial wallets. So we need to literally use second layers to unlock, Satoshi usability at a mass scale. So situations like APO, which is like any prep out, and CTV will allow that to actually happen. And so I think those things need to be discussed. And there's a big pushback on it because people think that, you know, oh, well, I don't need that stuff because I have a bunch of Bitcoin. And so that's just going to be messy. And smart contracts on Bitcoin just means more opportunity to lose coin, which I don't want. And it more opportunity to, you know, more opcodes are going to damage Bitcoin and hurt Bitcoin. And it's like, I understand that we want to be safe with Bitcoin, but also if Bitcoin is not available for anyone, then it is useless for everyone. And I really think that. So things like that are really unique, novel concepts that I think need to be looked at really seriously. And I talk like I know a lot, but I don't know a lot about the technical applications of some of these things on a really deep level. And when I listen to these people talk about it on really deep levels, it hurts my brain. But I enjoy it. It's like a good pain, you know. I mean, yeah, we're going to need that stuff. I mean, we're just going to. Where we're going with multiple billions of people using Bitcoin, we're going to need the Lightning Network to be humongous and be private and not be, you know, forcing people to use centralizing on and off boarding, KYC, you know, like chokeholds. And so we're going to need to develop covenants and state and federated chains and all of these really cool, funky things we can do with cryptography to preserve privacy and cash likability to make Bitcoin work for the world.
I love it. Mark Goodwin, as always, great to have you. We got to wrap this up for today. Yeah, man, let's have you again back soon. And
yeah, man. Thank you guys so much, Alex, Q, Chris. It's always a pleasure. Yeah, have a beautiful day, everybody. Enjoy the pump.
Have a great afternoon. See ya.